Welcome to QuickSpeak. You know our English podcast where we like to dig into all sorts of interesting topics. Well, today we're diving into something that I know I've definitely thought about a lot myself. Soulmates. Are they real? Or are they just something we dream up? I mean, over half of Americans apparently believe in soulmates. So to kick things off, why don't we take a look at how different cultures around the world see soulmates?
Well, it really is fascinating how differently this idea is seen around the world. Like in China, they have this belief in the red thread of fate. It's like an invisible thread that connects two people who are destined to be together, no matter what. And it's not just like a cute saying, it's been in their literature and their folklore for centuries. There's even the story about an official who didn't believe in it at all, but then he found out that his own red thread was tied to a beggar girl.
So even skeptics can be proven wrong.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder. So do other cultures have like similar romantic ideas about soulmates?
Oh, absolutely. Take Hinduism, for example. They see soulmates through this lens of karma. So Hindus believe that souls can be connected across multiple lifetimes. So the people we meet, even the ones who challenge us, could be souls we've encountered before. And we're just working through things together.
So you're saying it's not just about finding the one in this life. It's about realizing all those souls we meet. No matter how briefly, they might be part of something much bigger. That's kind of beautiful and kind of scary at the same time.
I know, right? And those karmic connections, they aren't always about romantic love. They can be deep friendships, family bonds, even like mentor-student relationships. It's just a way broader view of how souls interact.
So it's not all hearts and flowers. It's about realizing our souls are always learning and evolving through these connections. Which kind of brings me to this. Is the idea of soulmates just a poetic way of talking about love? Or is there something more going on?
Well, the Jewish tradition actually has a very specific take on this. They have a word, bashert. It means destiny. And it's the belief that everyone has a soulmate who's preordained. And they take it seriously. For centuries, families have been using matchmakers to try to find these basherts.
So it's not just a matter of swiping right. It's about aligning with a destiny that was set in motion way before you were born. But does that mean we have any control over this destiny thing? Does free will play a role?
That is the question, isn't it? And it leads us to this idea of soul contracts. Imagine this. Before we're born, our souls actually make these agreements with other souls. They kind of outline the experiences and relationships we need to grow spiritually.
So like a cosmic blueprint for our lives, but does that mean everything's decided for us?
Now this is where things get really interesting. Because even though soul contracts might give us a framework, they're not strict rules. It's less like a set-in-stone plan and more like a roadmap with different ways to get to your destination.
So it's not about fate deciding every little step. It's more like recognizing patterns and making choices that fit with our soul's journey. I like that. It feels like we have more say in things. But let's be real for a second. A lot of people think of soulmates as this big, passionate romance. Is that a common theme? Or do other cultures see soulmate love differently?
Let's head over to Sufism. It's a branch of Islam. And they really focus on this idea of spiritual love and union. And a good example is the poet Rumi. He believed that every soul used to be whole and complete, but then it got split in two. And so in this life, we're trying to find that other half and become whole again.
So it's not about finding someone to make us whole. It's about realizing we already were. And love brings us back to that wholeness. And that's kind of a mind-blowing way to look at it.
It is, isn't it? And it really makes us look inward first, connect with that wholeness inside ourselves before looking for it somewhere else, which is actually a theme you see across a lot of spiritual traditions.
So the soulmate journey starts with self-discovery. I can get behind that.
Yeah.
Because how can you really recognize your other half if you haven't embraced your own?
Exactly. And, recognizing soul connections. It's not always about romantic sparks either in some African cultures. They believe in soulmates who aren't lovers, but they're people who are meant to play big roles in each other's lives.
Like that friend who always seems to show up right when you need them. Or a mentor who guides you. Even if they're not in your life forever, they make a real difference. It makes me think about all the people who've touched my life in unexpected ways. Maybe some of them were soulmates without me even knowing it.
It's possible. And that reminds me of this beautiful Celtic concept of anam cara. It means soul friend. It's a bond that goes beyond romance. It's about finding someone who really sees you, understands you, and accepts you without judgment.
The soul friend. I think everyone wants that kind of connection. Someone who gets you in a way even your family doesn't. Someone who loves your quirks and embraces all of you. Do you think we can have more than one soulmate? Like, can we have a romantic soulmate? A soul friend? and like a soulmate mentor all at the same time.
That's something a lot of people wonder about. And honestly, there's no one right answer. But it definitely makes the whole idea of soulmates much bigger, doesn't it? And speaking of bigger views, there's the Japanese concept of en-musubi, which means tying of fate. It's kind of like the Chinese red thread. But it includes all the important connections in someone's life, family and friends, even those chance encounters that really stick with you.
So the much broader view of destiny says we're all connected in this web of relationships, and each one plays a part in making us who we are. Really makes you realize how precious each encounter is. And maybe, just maybe, some of them are more than just chance. Maybe they're like a divine plan of souls coming together at just the right time.
Exactly. And that brings us back to soul contracts. What if all those random encounters are actually part of a bigger plan?
Okay, so let's say we take this idea seriously. How does it affect our relationships in this life? Are we really just acting out a story that's already been written? Where does free will fit in?
All great questions, and ones that I think we should dig into even more. In the next part of our conversation, we'll unpack this whole idea of soul contracts a little more. Look at the differences between love and soulmate connections, and discuss how to handle these really intense relationships in a healthy way.
Right, so if you're as curious about this as I am, make sure to tune in for part 2, where we'll keep going on this journey into the world of soulmates.
Welcome back to our exploration of soulmates. In that first part, we traveled all over, discovering how different cultures view these really deep connections. We dug into ancient myths, read some poetry, and even touched on soul contracts. Those agreements some people believe we make before we're even born, agreements that might shape our relationships and spiritual journeys. Now I think it's time to get a little more practical, because, honestly, this whole idea of finding the one, that soulmate who completes you, it's a powerful idea. But is there like a downside to it? Could this belief actually create problems in our relationships?
It's a good question. And honestly, one that I've thought about myself. I mean, destiny can be so alluring, but it can also set you up for a lot of heartache if you're not careful. So how can belief in soulmates actually backfire?
Okay, so picture this. You meet someone,
Yeah.
and bam, instant connection, like it was meant to be, it's exciting, maybe even a little intoxicating. But here's the thing, that initial rush of feeling like it's destiny, it can blind you to red flags.
Oh yeah, you get so caught up in the fairy tale that you ignore those little doubts or those things you don't quite agree on because you're convinced this is the one.
Exactly. You might even make excuses for their behavior. Tell yourself, well, all soulmates have their challenges, or this is just part of our soul contract. But the truth is, healthy relationships, soulmate or not, they need honesty. And you need to be able to see each other clearly, even the flaws.
So it's not about denying that intense connection. It's about balancing it with being realistic and knowing yourself.
Right. Otherwise, you risk staying in a relationship that isn't actually good for you, all because you're holding on to this idea of destiny.
It's like that saying, love is blind, but marriage is a real eye-opener. Sometimes you got to take off those rose-colored glasses and see things for what they really are. Now, I want to go back to something we talked about before, soul contracts. If we believe in these agreements we make before we're born, does that mean we have less free will in our relationships? Like, are we just following a script that's already written?
I get why people worry about that. But think of it this way. Soul contracts might give us a direction, but they don't tell us every single step to take. It's less like a detailed script, and more like one of those choose-your-own-adventure books. You have choices to make along the way, and those choices shape the journey.
So it's like having a roadmap, but with multiple reads. You have a destination, but you get to choose how to get there. That makes me feel a lot less like a puppet of fate.
Exactly, and that's where free will comes in. We have the power to make choices that either match our soul contract or go against it. And those choices have consequences, good and bad.
It's like we're creating our reality with the universe.
Yeah.
We have a direction, but the details are up to us. I want to shift gears a bit and talk about how intense soulmate connections can be. People often describe them as really powerful, almost overwhelming. Why is that?
Well, imagine meeting someone who just gets you on a level you've never experienced before. It's like they can see right into your soul. They recognize parts of you that you haven't even fully acknowledged yourself. And that deep understanding, that feeling of truly resonating with someone, it can be intoxicating. It's like finding a missing piece of yourself that you didn't even know you were looking for.
I can see how that would be exciting and a little scary at the same time.
It is. And that's exactly why soulmate relationships can be so tough. The intensity can be a lot to handle, especially at first.
So even soulmates have a dark side.
Let's be real.
Yeah.
No relationship is perfect, but with soulmates, the stakes are higher. the emotions are stronger, and the possibility of both amazing happiness and heartbreak is bigger.
It's like everything's turned up to 11. The highs are higher, the lows are lower.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be self-aware and emotionally mature when you're in one of these relationships, because if you're not careful, that intensity can lead to some unhealthy patterns.
Okay, so what kind of unhealthy patterns? Aren't soulmate connections supposed to be all about love and harmony?
In theory, yes. But that intensity can trigger our insecurities, our anxieties, even past traumas. You might become too dependent on your soulmate, afraid to lose them. Or you might try to control them because you're scared of being abandoned.
So that deep connection can stir up our deepest fears.
It can. And if you're not aware of those patterns, you might end up sabotaging the relationship or creating unnecessary drama.
Even soulmates need space, right? They need their own lives, their own paths.
Absolutely. Having your own sense of self is so important in any relationship, but especially when the connection is that intense.
Otherwise, it's like two trees trying to grow together as one trunk.
Yeah.
They might start strong, but eventually they'll strangle each other.
I like that analogy. It shows how important balance is in soulmate relationships. You need to find that sweet spot between merging with your soulmate and keeping your own identity.
Like dancing the tango. Close and passionate,
Yeah.
but with freedom within that embrace. I want to talk about something that people worry about with soulmates. Heartbreak. Are these relationships more likely to end badly?
It's a fair question, and there's no easy answer. Heartbreak is part of life, and it can happen in any relationship.
But it feels like the stakes are so much higher when you think you've found your soulmate. Like if this connection can break, is there any hope for lasting love?
I get that feeling, and I think there are a couple reasons why soulmate relationships might feel more vulnerable to heartbreak. First, as we talked about, the intensity of the connection can make everything stronger, the joy and the pain. So when things go wrong, it hurts more.
Like the volume's cranked way up on your emotions. So even a small disagreement can feel huge.
Exactly. And second, believing in soulmates can sometimes give you unrealistic expectations. You might think that because you found the one, the relationship will be easy and always happy.
But that's not how real life works, is it?
Nope. Even soulmates fight, they go through tough times, and they change and grow, and when those challenges come up, you might feel let down, like the universe broke its promise.
So it's not that soulmate relationships are doomed to fail. It's more that the intensity and the expectations we bring can make the heartbreak worse.
That's a good way to put it. It's about finding balance, recognizing how deep the connection is, but also accepting that even soulmates are human. They have flaws, they make mistakes, and they have their own journeys to follow.
It's like learning to love with your heart wide open. But your eyes open too. Embracing the magic, but staying grounded in reality.
I like that. And that actually leads us to the next part of our conversation. We're going to get even more practical. We'll talk about how to recognize and nurture soulmate connections. We'll look for signs, explore different types of soulmates, and give some tips for navigating these intense relationships in a healthy and fulfilling way.
Because even though it's not always easy, connecting with our soulmates can be an incredible experience. So if you're ready to dive deeper, make sure to join us for part 3.
Welcome back to QuickSpeak. We've been having this really interesting chat about soulmates, looking at how different cultures see them, the good and the bad that come with these connections, and even the possibility of heartbreak. But I think the big question everyone's wondering is, how do you actually know if you've met your soulmate? Is there like a cosmic sign that flashes the one when they walk in?
If only it were that easy. There's no magic formula. But there are some signs and things that happen that often go along with soulmate connections.
Okay, so tell me, what are some of those signs? What should we be looking for?
One of the most common ones is that instant feeling of recognition. Like you've known this person before, even if you just met. There's this weird familiarity, a feeling of comfort, like you've come home.
Kind of like running into an old friend, but on a soul level.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just looks or shared interests. It's a deeper connection, something you just know. Right. You can meet someone who's really attractive or who loves the same things you do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't automatically make them your soulmate. There's got to be more to it, something that speaks to your soul.
Totally agree. Another common sign is a deep sense of connection and understanding. It's like you can read each other's minds, you finish each other's sentences, and you just know what the other person's thinking or feeling.
Like you have your own secret language.
Exactly. And this understanding, it often includes a deep empathy for each other's experiences, even stuff from the past. It's like you can feel their joy and their pain as if it were your own.
Okay, but some people might be thinking, I feel that way with my friends or family, too.
Yeah.
So how do you know the difference between those strong bonds and a soulmate?
That's a good point. And it's true, you can have deep connections with all sorts of people. But with soulmates, these experiences are usually much more intense. It's like everything's amplified. The recognition, the understanding, the empathy.
So it's about paying attention to the little things, the hints that tell you this connection is special. And trusting your gut feeling, that voice inside that says, this is different.
Yeah, and I'd add that soulmate connections often come with a sense of purpose. It's like your meeting was meant to be. You're here to help each other grow, learn from each other, and fulfill something together.
Like the universe brought you together for a reason. Maybe you don't know the reason right away, but it reveals itself over time. So can you have more than one soulmate? Or is it just one? The one.
That's a tough one. There's no easy answer. Some believe you only have one soulmate per lifetime. Others say you can have multiple soulmates who come into your life at different times and for different reasons.
So maybe it's not about how many you have. It's about recognizing that these soul connections can look different.
Right. They can be strong or subtle, and they can last a lifetime or just a season.
So you might have a romantic soulmate, a best friend soulmate, a mentor soulmate, even family members who you have a deep connection with across lifetimes.
Exactly. It's like we're surrounded by these soul connections.
Yeah.
And each one shows us a different part of ourselves.
Okay, so let's say you've met someone and you feel that soulmate connection. How do you nurture that relationship? How do you make that bond stronger?
Soulmate connections need work just like any other relationship. You need understanding and a willingness to grow together. One of the most important things is to communicate openly and honestly. Create a safe space where you can both talk about your needs, your desires, and your fears without judgment.
So build that trust and let your souls connect even deeper.
Exactly. And don't forget to spend time together. It's so easy to get busy, but make time for those shared experiences, the laughter, the deep conversations. Those are the things that feed your soul.
Even soulmates need to remember why they chose each other.
That's right. And another key thing is to support each other's growth. Encourage each other to follow your passions, learn new things, and become the best versions of yourselves.
Be each other's biggest fan.
Exactly. And remember, people change and grow over time. So be flexible and adapt to those changes.
Speaking of adapting, what about boundaries? I know that can be tough, especially in soulmate relationships where things can feel so intertwined. But why are boundaries important even in those really close connections?
Boundaries are essential for any healthy relationship, soulmate or not. They help you figure out your limits, what you need, and what you expect from each other.
It's like creating a safe space for your own heart.
Exactly. And in soulmate relationships where the energy between you can be so strong, boundaries are really important to prevent codependency and resentment.
You got to find that balance between we and me.
That's it. And creating those boundaries takes communication, empathy, and being willing to compromise.
So it's not about putting up walls, it's more like setting healthy limits. So both people can thrive as individuals and as a couple.
Well said. Because a true soulmate connection should make you both stronger, not hold you back.
Now, before we finish up, I think it's important to say that not everyone believes in soulmates, and that's totally fine.
Of course. It's a personal belief. But whether you believe in soulmates or not, we all want to feel connected. We all want love, belonging, and a sense of purpose in our relationships.
So let's celebrate all those connections that make our lives richer, soulmate or not. Let's take care of those bonds and try to grow together.
Beautiful. And who knows, maybe in exploring those connections, we'll find even more soulmates than we ever thought possible.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up our exploration of soulmates.
Yeah.
I hope this conversation has made you think about your own relationships in new ways and appreciate how deep and complex human connections can be. Embrace the journey of love in all its forms. As always, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us what you want us to talk about next. Until then, keep exploring, keep connecting, and keep those conversations going.
Yeah.